The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that shook the floor beneath Kim Taeho's boots. He had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now, but the sight of this place still took his breath away. Crystal towers stretched up so high they disappeared into clouds, and floating platforms carried delegates from hundreds of different worlds. But today was different. Today, fear hung in the air like a thick fog. Kim walked past the Xylorian delegates, tall insect-like beings who usually stood proud and straight. Now they hunched over, their forearms wrapped around themselves, clicking their mandibles in nervous patterns. The sound reminded Kim of chattering teeth on a cold winter day back in Seoul. The Vorthak representatives were even worse off. These beings of pure energy normally glowed with soft blue light, but now they flickered like dying light bulbs, phasing in and out of sight as if they couldn't decide whether to exist or not. Some had already vanished completely, probably fled, back to their home dimension. Lee Min-soo, Earth's military guy, stood near the back wall watching everything with sharp eyes. He was built like a tank and had seen combat in the outer colonies, but even he looked puzzled by what he was seeing. These aliens had technology that could move planets, weapons that could crack moons in half, and ships that traveled faster than light. Yet here they were, acting like scared children afraid of monsters under the bed. Council Prime Veltar floated up to the center podium. The ancient being looked like a jellyfish made of starlight, but his usual calm glow was dim and jittery. When he spoke, his voice echoed through every translator in the chamber, reaching every species in their own language. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," he began, and Kim noticed how his voice trembled. "The nightmare has returned. Our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed it. The Void Hunters are moving toward the core systems." The reaction was immediate. The Delian delegate, a creature that looked like a walking tree made of silver, let out a wailing sound that made Kim's ears ring. 3 Corvani representatives simply vanished in flashes of light, probably teleporting straight back to their ships. The Zephyrian ambassador started speaking rapidly in their musical language, but Kim's translator picked up words like evacuation and hide and run for the outer rim. Park Soo-jin sat in the observation gallery, taking notes on her tablet. She was the human expert on alien psychology, and she found all of this fascinating rather than terrifying. While every other species in the room was planning their escape routes, she was trying to understand what exactly these Void Hunters were and why they scared everyone so badly. Veltar continued his announcement, his glow getting dimmer with each word. 17 hunter swarms have been detected. They move through dark space, feeding on the terror of entire civilizations. Our projections show they will reach the populated sectors within 6 standard months. Kim had read the classified reports. The Void Hunters weren't just monsters or pirates or some hostile alien race. They were something far worse, ancient beings that existed partly outside normal space and time, creatures of pure nightmare that fed on fear itself. When they attacked a world, they didn't just kill people. They drained the very capacity for hope and courage from entire populations, leaving behind empty shells that couldn't even remember what it felt like to be brave. "All conventional weapons have proven useless," Veltar went on. "Energy weapons pass right through them. Kinetic projectiles have no effect. They exist in dimensions our science cannot fully understand. For 3,000 years, the only successful strategy has been evacuation and concealment." The chamber filled with the sounds of panic. Species that had been enemies for centuries now huddled together, sharing evacuation plans and hiding spots in the galaxy's empty outer regions. The mighty Corvani Empire, which controlled 1,000 star systems, was already talking about abandoning their core worlds. The Xylorians, master engineers who had built artificial suns, were discussing which of their colonies they could afford to sacrifice as distractions. Yang Hyun-soo stood near the military section, arms crossed, listening to all this with growing disbelief. He was a Marine who had fought in the border wars, a guy who had seen real combat and real fear. But this was different. These aliens weren't just scared of a tough enemy. They were talking about running away from their own homes without even trying to fight. The strangest part was how they talked about the Void Hunters like they were forces of nature, like hurricanes or earthquakes. something you could only survive by hiding from, not something you could actually fight and defeat. It was as if the entire galaxy had spent thousands of years learning to be victims instead of learning to be warriors. Kim watched the chaos unfold and felt something stirring in his chest. Not fear, but anger. These beings had invited humanity into their grand galactic community, and now they were planning to abandon everything they had built together. They were ready to let the monsters win without even throwing a punch. That's when he made his decision. Earth wouldn't run. 3 days had passed since the emergency council meeting, and the galaxy was already falling apart. Kim Tae-ho watched the news feeds from his office aboard the human diplomatic station. Entire star systems were going dark, as civilizations packed up and fled toward the empty regions of space. Trade routes that had existed for centuries were being abandoned. The great galactic highways that connected thousands of worlds were turning into ghost roads. But Kim had called for another council session, and somehow he had convinced them to listen to one more desperate plan. As he walked back into that massive chamber, he could see that half the delegates were missing. Many species had already started their great retreat, taking their ships and their people as far from civilization as they could get. The ones who remained looked at him with a mixture of hope and pity. Hope because they were running out of options. Pity because they thought the humans were too young and stupid to understand what they were really facing. Ambassador Thexval of the Corvani Empire was still there, his tall gray form towering over the other delegates. His people were known throughout the galaxy as master tacticians and warriors, but even they were planning to abandon their core worlds. He looked down at Kim with eyes that had seen 1,000 battles. Ambassador Kim, Thexval said in his deep, echoing voice, "We appreciate humanity's desire to help, but your species has existed in galactic society for barely 2 standard centuries. The Void Hunters have been the ultimate terror for 3,000 years. What could your people possibly offer that we have not already tried?" Kim stepped up to the central podium, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on him. Behind him, he could see his team getting ready. Captain Choi Dong-woo stood at attention in his crisp Navy uniform, looking like he was ready for a fight rather than a diplomatic meeting. Han Ji-won had her holographic displays prepared, loaded with information that would probably shock these ancient civilizations. "You're right," Kim said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "We are new here. We don't have your technology or your experience. But we do have something you don't." He paused, looking around the room at creatures from dozens of different worlds. "We have experience fighting these things you call Void Hunters." The reaction was immediate. Clicking, chirping, and harmonic sounds filled the air as aliens spoke rapidly in their own languages. The universal translators picked up fragments. "Impossible. They would be dead. No species survives direct contact." Han Ji-won stepped forward and activated her presentation. The holographic display filled the center of the chamber with images from human history. Ancient cave paintings showing warriors fighting shadow creatures. Medieval artwork depicting knights battling demons. Modern military reports from the outer colonies describing encounters with beings of living darkness. Every human culture has stories about fighting creatures of pure terror, Han explained, her voice steady and professional. "We called them different names. Demons, shadow people, nightmares, the things that go bump in the night. But we never learned to run from them." Captain Choi moved to stand beside the display. He was a combat veteran, a man who had spent years patrolling the dangerous edges of human space where pirates and worse things lurked. 3 years ago, my ship encountered what we now know was a Void Hunter scout near the Kepler mining stations. The alien delegates leaned forward to spite themselves. Direct contact with a Void Hunter was supposed to mean certain death or madness. "It tried to do what these things do," Choi continued. "Project Pure Terror. Feed on our fear. Break our minds before consuming our life force. But something went wrong with its feeding process." Yang Hyun-soo stepped up next to the captain. The grizzled Marine looked exactly like what he was. A man who had seen too much combat and come out the other side tougher for it. "The thing expected us to curl up and cry like babies. Instead, we got pissed off." He activated another section of the display, showing tactical reports from colonial defense forces. We've had 17 confirmed encounters with these creatures over the past 5 years. Lost good people, don't get me wrong. But we also learned something important. They don't know what to do when their food fights back. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the nervous clicking and phasing had stopped. These aliens were hearing something that went against everything they thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Kang So-young, the human xenobiologist, joined the presentation. She was young but brilliant, one of the few humans who had managed to earn respect from alien scientists. We've analyzed the psychological profiles of survivors from both human and alien encounters with void hunters. The difference is remarkable. She brought up brain scan comparisons on the display. When other species encounter pure terror, their neural pathways shut down defensive and aggressive responses. It's a survival mechanism that served them well against normal predators. But void hunters aren't normal predators. Kim took control of the presentation again. In humans, extreme fear triggers something different. Our stress hormones don't just prepare us to run or hide. They prepare us to fight back even when fighting seems impossible. He looked directly at Thexval, then at the other remaining delegates. While your civilizations spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of hiding from fear, we spent our entire evolutionary history learning to transform terror into anger. The Delian representative, still trembling like a silver leaf in the wind, managed to speak. But surely you cannot be suggesting direct confrontation with the swarms. The risk is beyond calculation. Yang Hyun-soo smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Lady, we've been taking risks beyond calculation since we first picked up sharp sticks and decided to hunt things bigger than us. It's what we do. Captain, Choi activated the final part of their presentation. Tactical analyses of void hunter weaknesses that only became apparent when someone actually fought back instead of running away. We're not asking you to trust us because we're smart or advanced, Kim concluded. We're asking you to trust us because we're too stubborn to know when we're supposed to give up. The moment you decide to crack any exam, you're essentially choosing between two completely different paths. One path leads through endless confusion, stress, and disappointment. The other leads to success, confidence, and achieving your dreams. The difference between these paths isn't talent, luck, or having expensive coaching. It's something much simpler yet incredibly powerful: the human method. Think about the last time you watched a movie that completely captivated you. You didn't check your phone, you didn't think about other things, and 3 hours felt like 30 minutes. That's the power of genuine engagement. Now imagine bringing that same level of focus and enjoyment to your exam preparation. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what the human method accomplishes. Most students approach studying like they're trying to fill a leaky bucket with water. They pour in information through cramming sessions, all-nighters, and mindless repetition, but nothing seems to stick. They end up frustrated, exhausted, and convinced they're just not smart enough. But here's the truth. The bucket isn't leaky. They're just pouring water in the wrong way. The human method works because it aligns with how your brain actually functions, not how we think it should function. Your brain isn't a computer that stores information in neat files. It's more like a web where everything connects to everything else. When you force information into isolated compartments, it becomes fragile and easily forgotten. But when you create meaningful connections, the information becomes part of you. Let's talk about what happens during a typical study session. You sit down with your books, maybe grab some coffee, and start reading. Within 15 minutes, your mind begins to wander. You think about that conversation from yesterday, what you'll have for dinner, or that movie you want to watch. You snap back to attention, feel guilty about getting distracted, and force yourself to continue. This cycle repeats until you're mentally exhausted, having absorbed very little despite spending hours at your desk. The human method completely transforms this experience. Instead of fighting against your natural tendencies, you work with them. You start by connecting new information to things you already know and care about. If you're studying history, you don't just memorize dates and names. You imagine yourself living in those times. facing those challenges, making those decisions. You create stories that make sense to you personally. Here's where it gets interesting. When you engage emotionally with the material, your brain releases chemicals that strengthen memory formation. It's like the difference between trying to remember a random phone number versus remembering the phone number of someone you have a crush on. The emotional connection makes all the difference, but the human method goes deeper than just emotional engagement. It recognizes that you're not just a brain on legs. You're a complete human being with a body, emotions, social needs, and personal experiences. When you honor all these aspects of yourself in your studying, something magical happens. Learning becomes natural, enjoyable, and incredibly effective. Consider how you learned to ride a bicycle. Nobody made you memorize the physics of balance and momentum. You didn't take written tests about wheel rotation or steering mechanics. You got on the bike, fell a few times, adjusted, tried again, and eventually mastered it through experience and practice. The human method applies this same natural learning process to academic subjects. This approach also acknowledges that different people learn differently, and even the same person learns differently at different times. Some days you might be in the mood for visual learning, creating colorful mind maps and diagrams. Other days you might prefer listening to lectures or discussing concepts with friends. The human method encourages you to pay attention to your natural rhythms and preferences, rather than forcing yourself into a rigid system. One of the most powerful aspects of the human method is how it handles mistakes and failures. Traditional studying treats mistakes as problems to be avoided, but the human method sees mistakes as valuable information about your learning process. When you get something wrong, instead of feeling discouraged, you become curious. What caused the confusion? How can you adjust your approach? This mindset transforms setbacks into stepping stones. The method also recognizes that sustainable learning requires balance. You can't sprint through a marathon, and you can't maintain peak mental performance without proper rest, nutrition, exercise, and social connection. The human method builds these elements into your study routine, not as rewards for hard work, but as essential components of effective learning. Perhaps most importantly, the human method helps you develop a healthy relationship with the learning process itself. Instead of seeing studying as something you have to endure to reach your goals, you begin to see it as an opportunity for growth, discovery, and personal development. This shift in perspective changes everything. Your motivation becomes internal, rather than external. Your progress becomes consistent rather than sporadic, and your results become sustainable rather than temporary. When you embrace the human method, you're not just preparing for an exam. You're developing skills and habits that will serve you throughout your life, in whatever career or challenges you choose to pursue. The final weeks before any major exam feel like standing at the edge of a cliff. Everything you've worked for, over months or years, comes down to these crucial moments. Your heart pounds every time you think about the exam date. Sleep becomes elusive. Even your favorite foods lose their taste. This is the final hunt, the most critical phase where everything you've learned gets put to the ultimate test. Most students completely panic during this phase. They abandon everything that worked for them during preparation and switch to desperate measures. They pull all-nighters, survive on energy drinks, and try to cram years of syllabus into their heads in just a few days. It's like a hunter who has been patiently tracking their prey for months, suddenly throwing away their bow and running blindly through the forest, hoping to catch something with their bare hands. But here's what successful students understand about the final hunt. It's not about cramming more information into your brain. It's about sharpening what you already know and developing the mental clarity to perform under pressure. Think of it like a professional athlete preparing for the Olympics. They don't try to learn new techniques a week before competition. Instead, they fine-tune their existing skills and prepare their mind for peak performance. The final hunt begins exactly 4 weeks before your exam date. This isn't arbitrary timing. It's based on how your brain processes and consolidates information. 4 weeks gives you enough time to review everything properly, while still maintaining your sanity and health. More importantly, it gives your subconscious mind time to organize and strengthen the neural pathways you've built during your preparation. During the first week of your final hunt, You become a detective investigating your own knowledge. You go through every topic and honestly assess where you stand. Not where you hope to stand, not where you think you should stand, but where you actually stand right now. This requires brutal honesty with yourself. You might discover that topics you thought you knew well still have gaps, while subjects you worried about are actually quite solid. This detective work isn't about judgment or self-criticism, it's about strategy. A smart hunter studies their terrain before the hunt begins. They identify the best vantage points, the likely paths their prey will take, and the potential challenges they might face. Similarly, you're mapping out your knowledge landscape so you can allocate your remaining time most effectively. The second week focuses on what professionals call active recall. Instead of passively reading through your notes for the 100th time, you actively test yourself. You close your books and try to explain concepts out loud as if you're teaching someone else. You solve problems without looking at solutions. You create your own questions and answer them. This process reveals the difference between recognition and true understanding. Here's something fascinating that happens during active recall. You often discover connections between topics that you never noticed before. Suddenly, concepts from different subjects start linking together in your mind. It's like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. These connections are incredibly valuable because they make your knowledge more robust and flexible during the actual exam. Week 3 is where the magic really happens. This is when you simulate exam conditions as closely as possible. You sit in a quiet room, set a timer, and solve complete practice papers. No breaks, no checking answers halfway through, no comfortable study playlist in the background. Just you, the questions, and the pressure of time ticking away. These practice sessions serve multiple purposes beyond just testing your knowledge. They train your body to handle the physical stress of sitting and concentrating for hours. They help you develop time management strategies specific to your exam format. Most importantly, they desensitize you to exam anxiety by making the unfamiliar feel familiar. During these mock exams, pay attention to more than just your scores. Notice when your concentration starts to drop. Observe which types of questions make you most nervous. Track how your handwriting changes when you're rushing. This self-awareness becomes incredibly valuable when you're sitting in the actual exam hall. The final week is perhaps the most misunderstood phase of the entire journey. This is not the time for intensive studying or learning new topics. Instead, it's about maintaining your mental and physical peak while doing light revision. Think of it as the calm before the storm, where you preserve your energy for when it matters most. During this week, you shift your focus from acquiring knowledge to maintaining confidence. You review key formulas, important dates, or crucial concepts, but you don't try to solve complex problems or learn new material. Your brain needs time to consolidate everything you've reviewed in the previous weeks. Sleep becomes your secret weapon during the final week. While your classmates are pulling all-nighters, you prioritize getting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep each night. This isn't laziness, it's strategy. A well-rested brain performs significantly better than an exhausted one crammed with last-minute information. The night before your exam, you do something that might seem counterintuitive. You relax completely. You watch a light movie, have a good meal, and go to bed early. You trust in the months of preparation behind you. You understand that cramming at this point would only increase anxiety without improving performance. This is the essence of the final hunt: patience, strategy, and confidence in your preparation. The moment you walk out of that exam hall, something extraordinary happens. The world looks different. Colors seem more vivid. The air feels fresher. Even the sound of traffic somehow seems more pleasant. You've just experienced what millions of students before you have felt: the incredible transformation that comes from conquering your biggest academic challenge. But here's what most people don't realize about this transformation. It's not just about passing an exam or getting into your dream college. Something much deeper has shifted inside you. You've discovered capabilities you never knew you possessed. You've developed mental muscles that didn't exist before. You've proven to yourself that you can achieve things that once seemed impossible. Think about who you were before you started this journey. Remember those moments of doubt when you wondered if you were smart enough, dedicated enough, or capable enough to succeed. Remember how overwhelming the syllabus looked when you first opened those thick textbooks. Remember the fear that crept in during those late-night study sessions when concepts seemed too difficult to grasp. Now compare that person to who you are today. You've developed the ability to break down complex problems into manageable pieces. You've learned to stay calm under pressure. You've discovered how to push through mental fatigue and maintain focus for hours at a time. You've built resilience that allows you to bounce back from setbacks and keep moving forward. This transformation goes far beyond academic skills. You've essentially rewired your brain for success. The neural pathways you've strengthened during months of preparation don't disappear after the exam. They become part of your permanent mental toolkit. The discipline you've developed, the problem-solving abilities you've sharpened, and the confidence you've built will serve you in every area of your life. Consider how this change affects your relationship with challenges. Before this experience, you might have approached difficult tasks with anxiety and self-doubt. You might have avoided situations that seemed too demanding or complicated. But now you have proof that you can handle pressure, master complex material, and achieve ambitious goals. This evidence changes how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. The ripple effects of this transformation touch every aspect of your life. Your family notices the change first. They see how you carry yourself differently, how you speak with more confidence, how you approach problems with a calmer, more systematic mindset. Friends begin asking for your advice on their own challenges because they recognize something different about your approach to difficulties. In your future career, this transformation becomes incredibly valuable. Employers don't just want people who can memorize information or follow instructions. They want individuals who can learn quickly, think critically, handle pressure, and persist through challenges. You've developed all these qualities through your exam preparation, even though that wasn't your primary goal. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is how it changes your relationship with learning itself. Before this experience, studying might have felt like a necessary evil, something you had to endure to reach your goals. Now you understand that learning is actually a superpower. You've experienced the joy of mastering difficult concepts, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, and the excitement of discovering new connections between ideas. This shift in perspective opens up a world of possibilities. You no longer see challenges as threats to be avoided, but as opportunities for growth and development. You understand that every skill can be learned, every problem can be solved, and every goal can be achieved with the right approach and sufficient persistence. The transformation also affects how you handle failure and setbacks. Before this journey, mistakes might have felt devastating, like evidence that you weren't good enough. Now you understand that errors are simply information, feedback that helps you adjust your approach and improve your performance. This healthier relationship with failure makes you more willing to take risks, try new things, and push beyond your comfort zone. Your time management skills have evolved dramatically. You've learned to prioritize effectively, eliminate distractions, and focus your energy on what matters most. These abilities serve you well beyond academic settings. Whether you're managing work projects, planning personal goals, or balancing multiple responsibilities, you now have proven strategies for staying organized and productive. The mental stamina you've developed is equally valuable. You've trained your mind to maintain concentration for extended periods, to push through mental fatigue, and to perform well even when you don't feel like it. This psychological endurance becomes a tremendous asset in any demanding situation, from important meetings to creative projects to personal challenges. Perhaps most importantly, you've learned to trust yourself. You've seen evidence of your own capabilities. You've watched yourself grow from someone who felt overwhelmed by the challenge to someone who conquered it completely. This self-trust becomes the foundation for future achievements. When new opportunities arise or difficult situations emerge, you have a deep inner knowing that you can figure things out and succeed. The galaxy of your possibilities has truly been transformed. Goals that once seemed unrealistic now feel achievable. Career paths that once intimidated you now seem exciting. Challenges that would have overwhelmed your former self now appear as interesting puzzles to solve. This transformation isn't temporary. It's not something that fades away after graduation or career success. It becomes part of who you are, a permanent upgrade to your mental software that continues to serve you throughout your entire life.